Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ryan Boyd. I am the co-founder of Greenwood Ave, which is a boutique sports advisory working with collegiate and professional athletes. And today we're here to talk about brand building for athletes. I'm here joined with an amazing panel of experts in each of their fields. And I'll let each one of them introduce themselves and tell you exactly what they do, starting with Kesha.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Kesha McLeod of KMC Me, visual architect, also author. I have started working with athletes maybe now, I keep saying 18 years ago, but it is 20 years ago now, and really realizing that fashion was an intersection to brand building and working with designers, having my athletes be fashion ambassadors for a lot of these brands and bringing them into that forefront.
Joe?
What's going on, everybody? Joe Carney, founder and CEO of Zinx. Spent 23 years in corporate America, primarily across leagues, media entities, ESPN, MTV, NFL, MLB, Players Tribune. And during the summer of 2020, I saw an opportunity to do something a little more purposeful in my life, and I wanted to solve two issues. One, how do we help corporate America with its lack of diversity? And two, how do we help the 98% of these young men and women who play collegiate sports find career and purpose before it's over? And we found a very innovative and progressive way to do that.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Cecil.
How y'all doing? Cecil White, agent and exec at WME. Been with the agency for 8 years. Work primarily with athletes, but also with some multi-hyphenate talent across film, television, and music. Prior to being at WME, started my career on Wall Street in investment banking and used basically that business development skill set to help talent think about building real enterprises. So whether that's brand endorsement deals, ventures, production companies, the gamut. Really excited to be on stage with you guys.
Amazing. Jason.
Hey everyone, I'm Jason Council. I'm currently head of culture at Gersh Talent Agency. Spent the first 20 years of my career doing nonprofit work, high impact community-based work, philanthropy work. Then in 2019, I started my own practice where I rooted it in industry reset. What's the industry? I'll show you how we reset it. How do we do that? We do that through a myriad of ways, but it's commitment to philanthropy, community, future workforce, and how do we just amplify brands through purpose? Thank you.
Amazing. So, Kesha, you've worked with some of the biggest athletes in the world, which I would love for you to name a few. But just from your perspective, how have you seen fashion help athletes create their brand and help them to also build their empire?
So when I mention the athletes, you're going to always know what they wore or how you've seen them. James Harden, Serena Williams, Serge Ibaka, PJ Tucker. I could go as far back as Chris Bosh, who was the gentleman of the league when the Big Three was in Miami. Austin Matthews, Candace Parker. I've worked with Kelsey Plum. I could keep going.
So everybody pretty much.
But,
show off.
But
You asked.
But working with all of these athletes, one of their focuses was, how can they amplify their style for their brand? Because anybody can put clothes on, anybody can just walk down the tunnel, anybody can do anything. But how do these brands know you? How do they take care of you? How can you now get paid for what you're wearing? How can you shoot that commercial and become these walk-in advertisements instead of shopping and spending your money? And so for me, one of the first talents I worked on that with was James Harden. And so the boom of that NBA tunnel was something him and I created with PJ Tucker that came like a year later, and created that duo that was attractive to brands. And so then it became brands wanting to premiere a sneaker on James at a Friday game at Madison Square Garden, or LeBron and James Harden, and so Versace wants to launch a jacket, or for him to be the face of BBC and Coach. So there were a lot of different opportunities that led me to having him in these fashion conversations.
Yeah.
So that's where I took those brands and those athletes and took them there.
And that's amazing. I mean, we now see the tunnel being the new runway.
Yes, the tunnel runway is what everybody calls it now.
Yeah, you help create that. That's amazing. Joe, you work with athletes more so for their life after sports, collegiate athletes specifically. Tell me, what are the things that you're doing to help them build their brand?
Yeah, so I saw a big void in the marketplace. There's been a lot of panels and a lot of talk about kind of maximizing your NIL and leveraging and talking about kind of that 1%, where we kind of strategically focused was on the 99% of these kids who aren't making real life-changing money, who are dealing with different stuff around mental health and wellness, who are struggling with the transition and the identity foreclosure, which I often refer to, which is, if I'm no longer an athlete, who am I? And these young men and women struggle mightily with that transition. So what we're doing at Zinx is very different, where we treat NIL more like a micro internship. So there's a whole personal and professional development component, and helping these kids discover who they are beyond the games they play before they hit that oh shit moment, which unfortunately everybody's gonna hit at some point.
Yeah.
So we have a proprietary app that allows athletes to create what we call a character profile. It's a series of short form text statements and short form video statements. And we strategically put the short form video statements on a 24-second shot clock. Mamba mentality. I want these kids pulling up to anybody in this room, whether it's alum, it's somebody they're going to interview with or whatever, and introducing themselves and not just talking about what game they play and when they're going to graduate, but what do they stand for?
Right.
Where have they been? How did they get to where they are? And now what can they bring to the table? Because these athletes have so many transferable skills and traits that they can pour into corporate America, they can pour into entrepreneurship, but there's not enough things out there doing that. So we work with brands who actually care about the 99% and
Right.
don't get caught up in the social followers and don't get caught up in they're part of a Power 5 program. And I want to support every single one of these kids from D1 down to NAIA, HBCUs, you name it. So
amazing.
we just got a very different approach.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Cecil, from an agency perspective, we've seen NIL really evolve over the last 3 years, and it's always ever changing. How does that affect the way you think about partnerships from a talent perspective?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we really think about life off the court as being kind of a continuum, and brand partnerships are like one individual vertical to monetize, along that path. And I think for each of our student athletes and our professional athletes, we have to meet them where they are. We have some 19-year-old kids who come into the agency and they want to start production companies and they have 5 brand endorsement deals before we even meet them. We have some folks that are freshmen, stepping on a college campus for the first time and don't even know what NIL stands for. And so we don't try to replicate the same playbook twice. I do think that student athletes are becoming incredibly sophisticated. The more repetition they get with working with different brands, the more they see different athletes, pro and collegiate, doing more complex deals. We have, 20-year-old, college athletes that are investing in private equity. I feel like my clients own more real estate than I do, in most cases, like before they turn 25 or 27. And, so we help them think through some of those deal structures and putting those deals together, introducing them to venture capital investors, growth equity investors. But then we also do the traditional, deals as well, which help them from a brand awareness standpoint, whether it's the Nike, the Adidas, the Gatorade deal as well. So I think it's just very bespoke and, based on the talent.
Yeah, that's amazing. I see more and more, that's the way the athletes are using their money, is to invest in real estate and invest in things that are going to be long lasting. So that's an amazing perspective. Jason, culture has always been really at the intersection of sports. From your perspective, what are the biggest opportunities that you see now with the emergence of NIL?
Well, I think it's an opportunity to kind of reclaim and redefine what you feel is cool, right? And not follow victim or be someone who follows a construct that was given to you, especially when we understand that you're going to monetize this potentially generationally. So what do you want to be associated with? What do you want to be affiliated with? A conversation we had in the green room, of course, is what's your why? So understanding what your why is from an impact standpoint and figuring out where you get in, right? How do you naturally fit into a space? How do you take what you're doing and look at it from a really multifaceted approach and make sure that purpose is embedded in it? Because NIL, essentially, we think about what we can do once we already get talent, but those trains are already moving. So it's how do you get on the train that's already moving and get it to the destination safely, right? And if you're able to give away some premium snacks along the way, people will just enjoy the ride that much more. So a big thing I try to do is understand the train's already moving and how can I get it to the station, but in a way where we all enjoy the visit, it's meaningful, and also understanding any inefficiency that we have is going to come at the expense of who we represent.
Amazing. We all like snacks.
Yeah.
So with that, like I said, we're relatively new. The space is still evolving. 3 years ago, when legislation changed, what are some of the things that you have seen in NIL that we have not taken advantage of? Like, what is the white space? And I'll open that up to anyone.
I'll jump out there. I appreciate that you called it, that you named it. I'm more like, what are the penny stocks, right? What are the stocks that you can get 50% commission on that no one's thinking about, right? And I love what Joe said about that 99%, because, and I say this with all due respect, but we think about the big four, the big five from a sporting standpoint, not understanding, and I think we're now coming to terms with it, and you can probably speak to that even more, how annual this can be, how daily this can be, and how hourly it can be. So looking for athletes that may have sat outside the margin from a monetization standpoint, and understanding how from a collective, from a 360 comprehensive model, there's so much meat on that bone, right? So what's the sports that are, again, back to redefining cool, what are the sports that are cool that weren't cool before, right? What's international? What's global? What has that type of connectivity? So we think about cricket, right? We're thinking about ESPN y Ocho, the things that are on there now that used to be niche, that's where you want to be.
Amazing.
I think the white space is the storytelling of all athletes. I think, where a lot of the attention tends to go is football, basketball, Power Five, and a great story is a great story, no matter where it comes from. So a lot of the pillars that we kind of talk about and focus on at Zincs are mental health and wellness, financial literacy, gender equality, empowerment through sport, how to build your personal brand and professional brand. So I think infusing education combined with brands in collaboration, like sometimes we look at the currency in money, right? 100,000, 1 million. But imagine the currency was the network that you build. Imagine the currency was this door opened up and led to $100,000 a year career that's only going to grow.
Yeah.
So I think if we stop looking, what's right in front of us and look to the future of what could be, I think that's where the white space is. We're like so short-sighted in the transactional, but think about these networks, even everybody in this room today. How can we take that to the next level?
Yeah.
So even with me and now working with college athletes and doing the same thing that I'm doing for the Serenas and the PJs, and taking them to Fashion Week, letting them sit front row and letting these brands know who they are 2 years before they're drafted, 3 years before they're drafted. And that's leading into bigger conversations where I could have with them and that person from 3 years ago, like, hey, we can bring them for the draft and lead to bigger deals. So that's where my mindset is. And I think that white space is still very open, because I even think Deja Kelly, which is an athlete I worked with this past Fashion Week, she was the only college athlete there. There was nobody else. But she's going to all the big shows. She's at Tommy. She's at Sergio Hudson. She's in the faces of everybody. She's meeting all the designers and the editors-in-chief that they know who she is, and she's not even in the major leagues yet, So those are one of the big things that we have going on, but I still think something is missing, that it can't just be that she's the only one.
Right.
Because there's tons of other athletes, there's tons of other things in the field, but she was the only one, so I still think it's something missing that brands are not connecting with yet.
Amazing. So from a collegiate athlete perspective, what do you think is the biggest value unlock for brands to work with collegiate athletes?
I think it's multifaceted. Like, the obvious is getting in early, right? And I think that's thematically what a lot of people on the stage have been talking about. But also, I think the opportunity to connect with Gen Z in a really organic way. Like, with our professional NBA, WNBA clients, NFL clients, we get briefs from brands that are 3 pages long. We want them to say this, we want them to do this in a video and post it on this day. For NIL, brands are coming to us and saying, look, we like this collegiate athlete. How do they want to activate? What are they doing on campus? Do they want to give back to their teammates? What matters to them from a philanthropic perspective? Do they want to have their own production? It's like, they understand, I think, that these folks can speak to this audience in a way more efficient way when it's organic, just given their age.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of the biggest, gap in the marketplace that I've identified.
Amazing.
I mean, we heard the word authenticity 67 times today, right?
Yeah.
And, you think about it, these kids are regular kids with real stories.
Yeah.
And, like, just forget the followers for a second, right? You're talking to somebody who's been fighting anxiety and depression my whole life. I've been medicated 24 years. And when I share these stories with these kids break down. And then we have real conversations that can move products and services because they're being their authentic self.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So like, I think there's such an opportunity to stop worrying about the social followers, stop worrying about the name on the front of the jersey, and start worrying about the kid and what they're going through and creating that community, right? At the end of the day, it's all about community. And I think, once you start to tap in these communities, whether it's first generation, whether it's somebody who comes from a single parent home, whether it's other things that are so relatable, I tell these brands, like, listen, mess with their team or people all day long. Like, you need aerial coverage. You need faces of your brand. But where's your boots on the ground?
Right.
Who's touching the community? Who's like really leaning in? Because at the end of the day, somebody who's got 2,000 followers, people, 1,800 of those people know that person personally. If somebody's got 2 million followers, 1,800 of those people know them personally. There's a difference, and there's a difference in the impact. So for me, it's that localized strategy. And again, I don't care where they came from, what school they go to, or anything. Are they being real? Are they being vulnerable? Are they sharing something that's going to inspire other people? And when that happens, that's the magic to me.
Yeah, for sure.
It's the saves and shares over likes and follows.
100%.
Yes, for sure. So if we're sitting here having this discussion 5 years from now, what do you think will be some of the key learnings that we've seen as the NIL space evolves?
For me, I think brands will take notice, and it'll be easy for them to recruit these athletes. It's not necessarily that it's a give and go, it's a push, and they're going more international now for what they're doing.
Wow.
I don't think it just stays in a box of what we're pitching and throwing against the wall, like, I know this is going to work, oh, I'm going to go here, and I know this works. It's going to be just way bigger than what we're seeing now, because what we see college athletes, they all have podcasts. That means brands are coming to these podcasts now. We see Angel Reese coming into the league, and she's announcing on Vogue, and she has a brand dressing her for all of that. All of those things are going to be part of college days now, and not just when you're part of a major league.
Yeah, let's put a pin in something you said around like podcast and I guess even media as a medium for these athletes. Like, what are some of the biggest opportunities as you see all of these podcasts popping up for athletes to own their own brand?
I mean, going back to what Joe said, the storytelling. We get to actually know who someone is when they start speaking. We see all of these athletes, and I've worked with them, all of them, for years, and we only see them on arenas and courts and don't know who they are, their personality, don't know how they speak, don't know how they interact with their friends, and we get to see that in that space for these production companies, them owning the rights to their own story to tell it to others.
Yeah, along those lines, what I love about podcasts is you don't just got a host getting reps and learning how to speak. You're now pulling in anywhere from 10, 20, 15 stories a clip. So we had a podcast, what I still think is the first ever, surrounding the HBCU student-athlete community. We had one incredible young woman who had less than 10,000 followers, and she interviewed 16 athletes from 13 different schools on a variety of different topics. So now those kids are getting them reps. They're building a community within the community, and I just think it opens up a lot more doors. You know, what I tell these kids all the time is you would not show up to a game without putting in the work in the weight room, right? You would not show up to a game without reading the playbooks and understanding how things are going to shake out. So you got to put in the reps.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of opportunity through brand deals to get those reps in. Somebody said something earlier, like, I understand time management. I can't be late. I got to send a thank you email. I got to represent myself properly when I'm outside. I got to watch what I put on my social. So there's all many life lessons that I think NIL can teach these kids at a big or small level that can be applied to that next step.
Yeah.
I think it's the education that we all wish that we got. Like, these kids are learning how to run and operate enterprises 10 years before, anyone else in a normal setting, right? Like, we have 17-year-old kids running their own podcast, understanding what a sponsorship deck looks like, to find a title sponsor for the show, understanding how to manage a production budget. When your best friend says that they'll be on the pod and then asks you for $5,000 because they see that there's a State Farm logo and that State Farm paid you to be able to put on the podcast, right? That's a different conversation. And so, to me, I've just really enjoyed watching these student athletes educate themselves and being a part of educating them on how to become business people and run their own enterprise.
Yeah.
I'll put a quick bow on it too. I mean, I think one of the big differences when I think of the question you asked previously and the most recent is we now understand there is no such thing as voiceless. You're not giving voices to the voiceless. No one is voiceless.
Right.
You're just amplifying their voices. And I can't say where the state will be in 5 years, But I'm excited because of the voices that are helping shape what it looks like. We're actually at the table, we have meaningful seats, and we're influencing what this part of the zeitgeist will look like now, and it'll most 100% form what it looks like in 5 years.
Yeah, yeah. Cecil, you mentioned earlier that you get a lot of brand briefs, that and the brands, and Joe, I know you do as well. When you get those briefs, if you could give feedback to the brand, what would be your biggest piece of feedback?
Trust the talent.
Yeah.
For sure. Trust the talent. I think there's a propensity to have guidelines, and I understand everybody has stakeholders, and there's like FTC guidelines that are very literal that you have to follow, but no one knows how to tell their story better than themselves, and there's a reason why you're selecting that talent. So obviously make sure the key messaging is there, and the product is integrated in the right way and all the things, but from there, let talent be themselves.
Don't tell them what they want, let them tell you. We build a task force for every single deal that we do, and we unpack what they like about the brand, what they don't like about the brand, what would they change, and we break it down. I'm 47 years old. What the hell do I know about a 21-year-old?
Yeah.
So let them tell us and help us be collaborative in that process versus we had a bunch of other smart people at our company figure this out, but if the kids ain't locked in, then the brand's not moving.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they got to be a part of that conversation.
Yeah.
Cecil and I just worked together last week or the week before with a talent, and I can't tell him what to do and how to dress and how it feels, and he's like, this is what it feels good to me, and this is how I always feel good, and I want it with this, and I want it with sneakers. I could only introduce you to the bigger moments of it all, but I need the organic feel of how it feels on you, because that's what brands look for. They look for that organic, authentic feel.
Yeah. We're running short of time, so last question, and I'll take it to you, Jason. From a perspective off the field for athletes and how brands engage them, what are the biggest opportunities of brands engaging with athletes in the community?
One, this answers that and this. Do your homework.
Yeah.
Right? Do your homework. Like, show up informed, right? Being culturally competent is real.
Yeah.
Right? So show up, especially if you want to deal with something sensitive and nuanced, like how someone shows up in the community, right? Because we don't believe and we don't represent people that believe in moment capture philanthropy or movement capture philanthropy, right? What's sustainable and what can you find authenticity in that you're aligned with?
Yeah. Yeah.
I say don't be about it when the social calendar tells you to be about it. Be about it 365.
Yep.
And that's when you can lean into the authenticity of what someone's about.
Word. Word. Well, thank you all. I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
thank you.
That's our time.
Yeah.
Thank you.